Okay, well, good evening. I can see there's scores of people here who've made it out tonight who care about kelp, and that is all we care about. We want people who are really, really, really passionate about this mission to save our planet, to support Maine, its farmers, and of course, this force of nature that you've all come to see tonight in Briana Warner. I don't need to tell you anything about her, because Briana is larger than life, and I think you all know that. So thank you all for being here. I'm Cherie Scott. I am the host tonight, and I'm so privileged to be here because of Andrew and Christina and this amazing theater that have given this series an opportunity to come back after COVID and put you all in these seats, and let's have this intimate chat tonight. So you're part of all of it. Thank you for being here. And without further ado, please let's give a very warm welcome to this force, this virtuous woman with the virtuous vegetable, Briana Warner. Come on out here. Thank you for being here. Have a seat. So what's Kelpin?
You know, quite a bit. We just had this lovely dinner with oysters and everything next door. So yes. Excited to be here. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you for being with us. And what my goal is for tonight is that we make it out just in time for Rising Tide to sell out of every jar of seaweed salad.
Perfect.
Right? That's the goal tonight. Because we vote with our dollars, and we vote because we are now educated kelp ambassadors once we walk out of here. So thank you. So let's get started with the most important thing, which is the beginning, right? Because you're here in the present right now. This is such an empowering place to be, but you had a start, and that start was with a whole bunch of political warfare. So what's going on over there?
Yeah.
Tell us about it.
This is a great picture. This is me in Yemen, actually. I was a foreign service officer for a number of years, a diplomat. And that sort of had been, you know, although I'd like to pretend I wanted to be a seaweed maven my whole life, that shockingly was not my dream since I was 3. But somehow, shockingly, in the same tune, my dream was to become a diplomat. And I am from it was, and I'm from a rural town in Pennsylvania, and you know, one of the first in my family to go to school. You know, that wasn't necessarily a conclusion at the time, but at the time, the Gulf War was going on when I was pretty young, and I remember seeing these videos of, like, you know, guns and fire and soldiers, and I thought, like, well, that didn't have to happen though, did it? And even at that point, it seemed to me that there was a better answer. And obviously the better answer is women in charge, number one. But if not that, there's ways that you know, if you just kind of meet people where they are, there's ways to get through really tense situations. And I think if we could all go into situations in life that way, a lot would be diffused. And while I'm not a diplomat anymore, I'm not this person, you know, it's still kind of carrying through. And so I studied Arabic in high school. I mean, I studied different languages in high school. I went to college for Arabic, and I just sort of left. I went to Egypt. I lived in Jordan. I went to school in Jordan for quite some time. I eventually came back to the States and was able to get a pretty tremendous fellowship through the State Department that was for minorities and women who were from backgrounds that didn't necessarily present themselves as white male and Yale. Which is what we call people in the Foreign Service, and was really looking to make sure that the Foreign Service more represented our country rather than what had historically been, which is one segment of the population. And so I was very fortunate in order to be able to go into the Foreign Service. I went to grad school. They paid for grad school. I was able to go into the Foreign Service and really make an incredible career of working in post-conflict countries, post-conflict economies, focusing on economic development in those countries. And you know, this picture is one of those places in my fantastic pantsuit.
Yeah, I love it. The beige cream white in the middle of a desert.
Right, and I like, at the time that was actually in style, plus a little bit baggy. Yeah, right. It was about, you know, 2005, 2005. And I was able to serve in Libya and a little bit of Yemen, and then I focused on South Sudan, kind of post-conflict there, and then Guinea. And then I was lucky enough to go to the European Union at the U.S. mission to the European Union to kind of work on launching the trade talks there. So it was a fascinating career. My husband, who is actually in the crowd tonight, and he never gets to come to these things because we have 2 young kids, is from Maine, and we had been coming here for quite some time to visit his family, and he had a burgeoning career, super smart guy who we kind of realized at some point that lifestyle didn't work for 2 careers, and so we took a 2-year leave of absence to come to Maine and try it out, and that was 7 years ago. So that, I guess I don't think they're taking me back at this point. I think my 2 years is gone. But it's, what I kind of quickly discovered once I got here is, in fact, many of the problems that we're seeing overseas, are not all that dissimilar to what we're seeing in our state, which is the oldest state in the country, the most rural state in the country. Our natural resource dependence is staggering. And while the problems are obviously very acute in other areas, especially in the developing world, what we have here in northern Maine and on the coast, and although, in Portland area where I currently live, we can all kind of pretend that we're this state that is very kind of metropolitan, and most of the population north of Portland is totally dependent on the water.
Right.
And tourism doesn't really even hold a candle to lobster.
Right.
And the Gulf of Maine is warming faster than 99% of oceans in the world. Yeah. So how is that different from when we kind of look out elsewhere and say, we saw the writing on the wall and nobody did anything about it? Well, just go up to North Woods and you'll see the same thing here.
So when you came back and you settled in with your husband and you said, okay, Maine's the place we're going to start a family here, right? What sort of inspired you to start your pie company? Where did that come from? And obviously your trajectory of your professional career, I'm sure we're going to follow it tonight, seems like it's all over the place, but actually it's very linear, right? I mean, you've got this
honestly, I don't know what the hell to do.
But that's the best thing about Maine is you come out, you get inspired by things. It's a maker state. It just is.
It is. Well, and I came here and, the kind of social justice warrior that I tend to have in my soul. I came here and it is in Portland, one of the issues, and I thought I was only going to be here for a year or 2. But in the Portland area, we do have this incredible and immense resource of all these new Mainers that are coming with high degrees from Iraq and Myanmar and name the place, and these people were geologists and doctors and bakers and anything else. And in Maine, we are such a white state that there is a lot of fear of hiring people that maybe don't speak the best English, and I'd like to attribute it to that and not some sort of more nefarious and malicious belief. But honestly, you hear people all the time in restaurants in Maine, how would I hire them? They don't speak English. I'm like, have you ever gone to New York? Have you ever gone to a kitchen in New York?
Right.
You don't need to speak English.
You learn your best Spanish back there. That's where I learned all my Spanish.
That's exactly right.
All the bacon, and I learned how to say BLT in Spanish. It was
how do you say it?
Tocino, lechuga y tomate. That's what it was. BLT.
That's amazing.
Right. Yeah, that's where I learned it.
I think that's the thing is there's obviously this huge resource in Portland when we are the oldest state and we can't find enough people to fill jobs.
Yeah.
And there's all these people moving here with incredible skills. So I had always loved pastry. I'd always made pastry, but my idea was okay, well, let's give people their first job then. If that's what it takes, if it just takes proving a concept, let's do it.
So you were sitting in Maine one day having this cup of green tea, and you decided, okay, I know how to bake a really kick-ass, really great crust. I'm going to start a pie company.
I think I was in Brussels having that thought because we were going back to Maine, and I was like, well, what the hell am I going to do? And
so you could start a pie company.
I should bake.
All right.
And I just remember at one point in Guinea, my husband was evacuated because of civil conflict. There was 4 of us at the embassy, and I was in a house, not a compound, because the American government doesn't give any money to kind of the African embassies. There's no protection. You think of Iraq, people were going around in bulletproof cars. I had my like SUV, just kind of driving in my single standing car while people were in a great deal of civil strife. And you know, when you're locked in your house for 10 days and you have nothing except the avocado tree outside, you make a lot of things. And you know, I started making like sweet avocado pie or cocoa pie from the chocolate trees in the neighborhood, or mango pie, or all of these things. And I would bring them to youth leaders, or they would come over to the house and I'd bake a bunch of pie and be like, this is an American thing. They're like, mango pie. I'm like, totally American. Totally an American thing. This is what we do in America. And I had this maple syrup that my father-in-law has, sort of like this small hobby farm in northern Maine, and they would send us maple syrup through the diplomatic pouch. So I had like a big thing of maple syrup, and I would make pancakes on Saturday mornings for like the civil conflict, like driving youth leaders in between elections, and I'd have them over for pancakes and maple syrup, which they called bread with sugar water. And they were like, oh good, more American bread with sugar water. I'm like, exactly, like that's exactly what it is. And so I just started making these kind of concoctions, and I continued that, you know, in Brussels, just with kind of like going to, you know, it was with the EU, so I was in 27 member states constantly, and you know, like, oh, okay, they soak these cherries in anise liquor, that would be a great pie. Or like, you know, they use a lot of like burnt caramel with salt, and, you know, mixing that in. And, you know, so I had played with it a lot, and I thought like, okay, what better way to bring people together than through food? Yeah. And if this is a good way to start like a first job for new Mainers, like, let's see where it goes. And I started this thing thinking it was going to be really small, sort of like a first job program for people. Yeah. And then Boston Globe writes about it, and the Washington Post, and all of a sudden there are people at the door, and I don't even have pies. Like, I'm doing it for coffee shops. And
but why were they writing about the pie company? Were they writing about it because of the pies, or were they writing because who you were hiring to make those pies? I think it was who I was hiring to make those pies, and also like the super sexy headline at the time was like, diplomat turns baker, right? Like that was that was like, that is a sexy headline. It's fetching. Yes. So, you know, after about a year and a half, it was clear to me that standing on my feet for 20 hours a day was not necessarily where I wanted to be, but I had kind of proven out the concept, and I really, at that point, a position came up in the Island Institute, which is up in Rockland. Can you tell us a little bit about that, what the Island Institute does? Sure. So it's a nonprofit committed to diversifying, well, I'm saying my version of it. There's someone from the Island Institute here that could specify it a lot better. But they basically focus on like the existence and stability and success of island and islanded communities, both in Maine and elsewhere. Okay. And they at the time were like, okay, we focused on marine programs, we focused on education, we focused on energy, but like we actually don't know what economic development looks like for the coast in the future. So I had seen this position come up, like, oh, that looks perfect. Like, what was the position? Economic development director. I decided to stay, and it was to make a whole new set of programs to like help business on the coast in Maine. I thought, well, I would love to start a family. A nonprofit feels like a good place to do that versus on your feet for 20 hours in a bakery. And I was able to sell the bakery and sell the recipes, and people brought on all my staff, and it felt like a great transition out. And I started there and started working deeply with the lobster fishery. Wow, what a transition from pie to lobster. That's awesome. But that's how cool your role was, that it was so sort of, I don't know, it's almost like very permeable. It was able to just kind of take this journey along with you. Wherever you went, you found a way to leave a footprint. Right, and it's always food and economic development. Yeah. Right, and I think that's where at the Island Institute, you know, here in Maine, we are completely dependent on a lobster monoculture. That is, you know, if there's any sort of vision that we have any other marine economies out there, the answer is we don't. Aquaculture is rising as one now, but lobster, we are totally dependent on lobster. And I'm not sure that most Mainers understand how
much we are dependent on that.
Well, why don't you share with us today a little bit about this whole aquaculture movement that, you know, Atlantic Sea Farms is trying to push through, and let's talk about the challenges that you're facing as a CEO for Atlantic Sea Farms, right? But before we talk about that, what I wanted to know is, you know, what is the history between Atlantic Sea Farms? I think some folks know it as another company and then it got rebranded. So give us a little bit of the background on that and set the stage for us before we get into it.
I think, you know, I've met the Island Institute, and the question that I get to answer, and I have the privilege of answer, is like, here is the fund that you can work on, figure out what does a diverse economy look like on the coast of Maine. And obviously the first thing you need to lean into is that lobster industry. And on the coast of Maine, we have this like incredible challenge, right? And just kind of positioning what this looks like is, the challenge is the Gulf of Maine is warming faster than 99% of oceans in the world. The challenge is the lobster industry dominates it. So those are two challenges that are terrifying, right? Yeah. Because as the water continues to warm, the lobster fishery will change, and it is becoming increasingly volatile. What that change looks like, nobody knows, and everybody's just guessing. Right. But the opportunity statement is more compelling. You have 4,000 plus lobster license holders in the state of Maine. They're all owner operators. That means that, you know, you go to Massachusetts or you go to Canada or you go to kind of anywhere else in the United States, and you have a person with a lot of money that owns a bunch of boats, and it's their fleet and they manage it. In Maine, every person, if you have your license, you must be on your boat to fish it. And that is totally unique. And what that has done is created a system where you have 4,000 plus business owners on the water that are managing their own future. More than that, you can't, you know, their kids are the next generation of fishery, because that's how you kind of get into the system, is being an apprentice and working through this kind of like apprenticeship system that gets you in to get a license. So this is a generational individual owner operator fishery. And they work, you know, all year, many of them, but there are very few options for that fishery, where they used to fish for cod, they used to fish for shrimp, they used to scallop, they used to do, you know, name the fishery, and all of it. And now there's none of those options. So one of the issues that we started looking at is like, well, cool, they have these boats, they're individual business people. The lobster industry is doing very well right now. It is increasingly volatile, but this season, for example, was a great season. 2 seasons ago was a great season. 2012, people went bankrupt. And it's just not predictable. So, you know, we're thinking, okay, we can get them into mussels, they can get them into oysters, we can get them into seaweed. And with mussels and oysters, it's a fairly straightforward path, although capital intensive, and it's hard. I'm not kind of downplaying how hard it is, but it's a well-trodden path that people know. In seaweed, 99% of the seaweed that we eat in America is actually imported, and it's imported from Asia. It's all dried. So that bright green seaweed salad that people eat is dried, rehydrated, and then all the stuff that's in Mountain Dew is added to it to make it look bright green. I hope I turn all of you off of, of that seaweed salad. Plus that is also grown in the cheapest areas to grow. So that's often right off the shore. And as we know, waters in most Asian countries aren't particularly well regulated. So you're getting kind of an uptake of incredible toxins and heavy metals and all of this stuff. So there is clearly an opportunity here, a market opportunity. Like, take out the fishermen for a second, but just from a product perspective, seaweed is one of the fastest growing categories in the United States. Seaweed snacks, like anyone that knows anyone under 20 probably sees them eating seaweed snacks. They're just eating it all the time. Sushi, like you can go to Presque Isle and get sushi in the grocery store. Not that Presque Isle is the end of the world, but it's like you're not someplace you would expect sushi. And so there's this market opportunity. We have more coastline than the state of California, and we have 4,000 people that are underemployed in the winter and have all of the mechanisms in which to grow kelp. So the answer was pretty obvious.
So how did you come up with that answer? How did you come up with this model that is now become like this proof of concept? And Maine kind of owns it and is kind of like, we've done this, it's worked, you know, and let's take it elsewhere. Let's see if we can, you know, spread the word out.
Yeah, so there's this, the founder of the company, he had been doing this for a while. They had 2 small farms around Cherie Island in the Casco Bay, and they had learned how to do seeds, and they had learned how to grow kelp, but it sort of just stayed there, 20,000, 30,000 pounds, which basically gets you into 5 restaurants that you can sell a few things into, and there was no kind of scale there. So I started working with them as an advisor to kind of help them think about how they could grow their supply. And I started working with a colleague to train fishermen on how to do this, but the deal was Ocean Approved, which is the company that has to guarantee purchase of what these people grow, because there is nobody else out there. So if they grow it,
right,
there's no one to sell it to if this person doesn't promise it. So I was eventually asked to take over as CEO after a founder transition, and it was incredibly obvious to me what the next steps were, which is like, we can produce great seed, because you need seed to do a farm, and create a nursery that created this great for seed. We can give it to people for free, and then we buy back everything they grow and turn it into a product that people want to buy and people want to eat. And with that increased demand, and with your bait, which looks a whole lot like lobster, we pick up at the wharfs, which looks a whole lot like lobster. Everyone's going to get their stuff bought, also like lobster. They can go out and grow excellent kelp. And we hired people to do all of the technical assistance, to help them get their leases, to give them their free seed. And the idea was like, all right, now it's on us to build the demand for a product that nobody's ever had, no one ever knew they wanted, but they do.
Right.
And, make products that are kind of movable throughout the entire United States. So that's what we did. We now have 27 partner farmers, and we went from that 20,000 pounds in 2018 to 1.2 million pounds is what we plan on taking out of the water this spring.
And I think I've seen the stat somewhere. The Island Institute projected like 35 million pounds. Oh, sorry. How many pounds is it by 2035?
Yeah, I thought their estimates were very low. I think they were at like 2 million pounds, and I was like, we're doing that in 3 years. But I think the thing is, we are now about 86% of the seaweed that's produced in the United States, and around 96%
all
of what's
in Maine.
all in Maine, and we're about 96% of what's produced in Maine. And it's not us, it's not Atlantic Sea Farms, it's our partner farmers. And I think what's so cool is 86% of the seaweed that is produced in the United States, line-grown seaweed that's produced in the United States, is grown by Maine fishermen. Like, they are leading in aquaculture.
Wow.
And anyone who's like, fishermen are immovable, or fishermen, like, they are the leaders of the seaweed industry in the United States.
So tell us what it's been like for you as a female CEO who's not from Maine. And you're walking around and you're evangelizing and you're pitching this deck to them. Like, we're going to give you the seed, we're going to buy back. How was it received? Did you win them over? I mean, obviously you've been successful, but what were those early days like for you?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like the meeting people where they are, right? Like, back to that thought of like, it doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah.
I think when we talk about climate change, and I can certainly talk about how seaweed actually helps remove carbon and nitrogen from the water and is one of the most efficient uses of food in the world, and like it actually improves the environment where it's grown with no water, no arable land, all of that. But that's not what I lead with. Like, hey, you guys are going to be climate change warriors is not what I lead with.
They don't care. Yeah.
They don't care. But they know that, but also like they know the water's changing, right? Yeah. And our lobster industry in the state of Maine is one of the most conservation-minded fisheries in the country. And we might not recognize that here, but this owner-operator model was put in to conserve the industry. They have something in Maine that anyone who knows the fishery recognizes as pivotal in the boom in the lobster population now. When they pull up an egg-bearing female, they cut a notch in its tail. You cannot sell that lobster. We also have an upper and lower size limit. They don't have that in Canada. So by the time, which is about 5 years, that V-notch tail has to grow out, she's too big to catch. So we are permanently replenishing that stock. That is self-imposed by our fishermen. Our trap limit is self-imposed by Maine's fishermen the owner-operator model, the fact, like all of these things.
It's a fantastic system,
They're-
and they're regulated, the system.
That's right.
So they can protect their futures.
That's right.
for
They
their
are some of the
grandkids.
most
Yeah.
conservation-minded land or water users in the world. They are world class. So the idea that they would transition to kelp is really not a big transition.
I can't even get my 4-year-old to eat kelp, so I'm wondering how you got them to farm it.
It's easy. Well,
I mean,
the same
tell
way
us
you
that.
do it for, I do it for my kids. I stick it in their smoothie and they don't know it's there.
Ah.
It's
So that's
it's-
what we're talking about, right there.
But with fishermen, it's not about that. It's like, hey, you guys aren't doing anything in the winter. You know, most of them, some go offshore, some scallop, but there's not many options. They have a huge boat payment because more and more lobster is going offshore. You need bigger equipment, you need a larger boat, and you're not
you have
able
families to feed,
and
right?
you have family
Yeah.
to feed, and you're relying on 6 months of income on a natural resource that may or may not come in.
Right.
Like it's not a big leap of faith to be like, hey, I have promised income for you, and I promise you free seeds to mitigate your risk if you lose your farm, and here's also technical assistance to help you set it up. Like, I've never heard anyone hear that and say like, that's bullshit, right? Like, you know, even if they don't do it, they understand why people would. And we've also chosen to work with, you know, people in the lobster industry that are leaders and are good ambassadors. So it only takes one person. There's one person in Spruce Head who we, at the first 2 years, we just paid people at the dock because we just wanted them to know that, like, hey, we're gonna actually pay you. This is a real thing. Because
Right.
they were all like, I don't know what you're gonna do with this stuff, but like,
Okay.
here.
Yeah.
And so we paid people at the dock, and it was April, so no one had anything to do because it's Spruce Head in April. And there was a bunch of guys at the end of the dock just kind of watching what was going on and talking, trying to figure it out. And he got his check and walked to the end of the dock and said, look, boys, here's the future. And now last year I had 450,000 pounds coming out of Spruce Head with 8 farmers.
Wow.
And it just takes one, and it just takes someone to understand that it's a viable thing, and that we will pick up, and that people get the seeds, and it's really not a leap. And I think the fact that we have this conservation-minded fishery and these individual owner-operators means that, you know, in Maine we constantly hear like, there's not enough workers, we need new people, we need young people, and on the water, we have enough.
An abundance of
We
them.
have an abundance of
Yeah.
incredibly qualified people that can turn around. They're better fishermen. You know, the founders of this company have been doing it for 9 years. And the first year that a fisherman farmed for us, they got double the yield on one farm than the people who'd been doing it for 9 years. They know what they're doing. It
Wow.
was really nice.
So let's talk about these fishermen, because they're on the water. I mean, these are all the beautiful products you've created, the retail products that you've created with the kelp, and you also have the bag kelp, right?
Yep.
Which
So-
you can actually take home. So tell us all a little bit about it while we have the whole product line ahead in front of us.
So we
Tell us a little bit
launched
about it.
our products in food service in 2019, which and we launched them kind of throughout the country. There was a big launch with David Chang and Sweet Green, and talking about Maine kelp and like this woman-run company in Maine, and we were on burgers in the 70 location chain Be Good, where they'd like wanted to show that they were good stewards of their own environment, so they took meat and then put kelp on it. And it's like, look, and Legal Seafood and Little Beet in their salad dressing and everything else. And so we were just we launched and we were out. Then COVID hit, and we all know what happened to the food service industry. And so we had a decision to make at that point of like, oh, we got to the top of the hill, we got to the top of the hill. And in fact, like there's this very illustrative moment where we launched with Sweet Green in February of 2020, of 2020. And there's this picture that came out, I think around the first week of April, of an empty Times Square. And there's this billboard in the middle of it, on this picture in the New York Times, with David Chang holding up a piece of kelp saying, "Eat Atlantic Sea Farms kelp at Sweet Green." And it just felt like an analog to what happened, right? Like we did it, like we got this, we got to get like
And you're in
30
Times
more
Square.
farmers on the water. Just kidding, like everything is washed out. And so we didn't know what to do, and we were going into harvest season, which is April to June. And we bought every single blade of kelp that was grown just as we promised we would.
Right.
And we didn't know where it was going, and we didn't know what we were going to do with it. But we knew that if it was the last dollar we spent, it was going to be on fulfilling our promises. And so we then pivoted into retail, and within 9 months, we were in 1,400 stores, Whole Foods National, Sprouts National, Wegmans, and launched this product line. And just my team just put their head down and did it. And there was no part of that was easy. And so we're now back in food service and ingredients, but now also have this branded product where everybody throughout the country that buys this gets on the back, there's a picture of each farmer, and
I saw that.
There's right here, there's a picture of the farmer, where they're from, what they do, how they got into farming, how they got into lobster. And each kind of box has a story, and it's about Maine, and it's about recovery, and it's about climate change adaptation and climate change mitigation. And we're telling our story that way.
I think it's amazing that you were able to take that crisis and turn it on its head, right? Because you had all of this harvest and you've paid everybody, so now your coffers are empty.
We had so many pallets in freezers all over the country.
So who came up with these recipes? How did you guys formulate and decide as a team, okay, let's come up with some cubes, let's come up with a seaweed salad, let's do a kraut, let's do a beet kraut. Like, who came up with that? Who was that on the team that kind of
The shredded blanch kelp was actually something that the founders had decided to do, and it's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it knocks any sort of low tide taste off of, when people eat seaweed, they kind of expect it to taste like the ocean. Ours doesn't. It's all fresh. There's no dried to it. And we blanch it. It's more like a green bean. Like, you use it on a salad. Like the sweet greens, it was a salad. It was just defrosted and sprinkled over a salad. It's same with little beet, other places. So that one was already there. The rest of them, we just sort of thought through, like, okay, who is the low-hanging fruit to eat seaweed, fresh seaweed?
Mm-hmm.
And people who eat kimchi are not going to sneeze at eating kelp, right? They're going to be like, oh, finally.
Yeah.
Like, fresh kelp. Right. Amazing.
Right. We've
like,
been doing this for hundreds of years.
This is great. Like, fermentation, I drink kombucha. Of course I'm going to drink kelp, right? So, like, fermentation also is super healthy. I mean, kelp is one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet, but fermenting it even boosts that and makes a lot of those nutrients more bioavailable to the body. And so fermenting it gives you those probiotics and prebiotics, but also makes the nutrients in the kelp bioavailable as you eat it. And our idea with these products was we need something that people can stick a fork in and eat it. Because when you get a dried piece of seaweed, seaweed snacks are easy, right? But you go into like the Asian aisle, which I still think is just the most tremendously racist, awful thing that we still have an Asian aisle, like it's food. But you go to the Asian aisle that is in most grocery stores, and there's dried seaweed. Mm-hmm. And only the most kind of intrepid chef is going to take a hunk of dried seaweed home, or those of us who are ambitious and think we're actually going to use it.
Right.
And we stick it in a soup once, and then it sits in the back of our pantry because none of us know how to use it.
Right.
What are you going to rehydrate it and chop it up and put it as a salad? Like, nobody knows how to use it. So our idea was like, let's create a product line that people can simply stick a fork in and eat. And it'll be really easy to eat, and you don't have to be a chef to do it, and you don't actually even have to know how to cook. Right. And so our smoothie cubes, you just stick them in a smoothie. Our ready cut kelp, you just defrost them and put them on your pasta, put it on your in your soup, in your ramen, in your salad, whatever you want.
There's that smoothie. That's the one I've been eyeing.
So that one it launched our Kelp Cubes have launched in Sprouts, and they just asked for a product line extension. So we just, in January, we'll be launching a blueberry ginger Kelp Cube with Wyman's and a cranberry Kelp Cube with Ocean Spray. That'll be coming out in January, and we'll hit Sprouts shelves. And our Kelp Cubes are being launched in Hannaford as we speak, so you guys should all be able to access it soon. But I know it's
in the Asian aisle?
Like in the Asian in the frozen aisle, thank goodness. Aisle. But like we had been available on the West Coast is kind of what we think of as our backyard, because most New England chains are like, ooh, but
So,
is
you know,
a meatloaf.
we're talking about we're talking about food in Maine, right? So let's talk about how, you know, I think the fact that you started out in food service is interesting, and then you moved into the retail, and now you're in so many restaurants. What are some of the restaurants here in Maine, or who's really being super creative with your stuff? Give us like a few examples so that we can go support them, because they're supporting your work.
My favorite example is Ilma Lopez at Cheval and formerly Bigelow. She makes the most creative stuff with kelp. She right now has a kelp malfadine that is in all the Rosemonts, and it's made with our kelp. It's just a delicious pasta that's perfect for like a clam sauce or any sauce really. She makes like a kelp foie gras, like with a coating on the outside.
Kelp foie gras.
It's crazy. Wow. She does a pate and a foie gras. She like does a coating. It's amazing. She did chimichurri sauce. I mean, a chimichurri sauce. She also did churro, like sweet stuff. She does
a kelp cake.
All of it. Yeah. She does all of it. She does a martini. Another one, Blue Baron up here. Well, I guess it's in Rockland or Camden. They do a kelp vodka with our kelp. And
what does that taste like? Is there?
It tastes like a Bloody Mary.
Okay.
Like it tastes perfect for a Bloody Mary.
Nice.
I have it in my office, and I pour it for people, and it's like a dirty martini kind of thing. But
that's where all those ideas are coming from, your office with the kelp vodka.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
know
do
how
have
this all works.
I have about 3 bottles in there, and then a bourbon, and that's where when the days are tough.
Yeah.
But you know,
that's the secret sauce.
Exactly. Luke's Lobster, which you have a lobster pasta recipe of theirs up right now. They have kelp on their salad dressing. But a lot of the innovation, sadly, hasn't happened here. It's mostly with restaurants. Ilma is kind of being the big exception. It's in restaurants in New York and California, and like Blue Hill at Stone Barns is wrapping lamb in our full leaf kelp and cooking it for 24 hours and making this incredibly moist meal. Chefs are using it in like Le Bernardin and you know, just amazing restaurants that, you know, they don't use that much,
right?
Because their plates are this big. But you know, just really, really fine cuisine with kelp is sort of the star of it, and it's been incredible to see people and chefs kind of move out of this idea that it's only for seaweed salad, it's only for ramen, and actually move into more, you know, diverse recipes that kind of can pull out traditions from everywhere. There's this famous chef in New York, Victoria Blamey, who is just doing, she basically is kind of like a gypsy chef. Like she takes kitchens for like 3 months and does amazing meals and then moves on to the next thing. And she's this beautiful, gorgeous Chilean woman, and she's been up to our farms a few times. And that there's a huge tradition in Chile, historically, of using kelp, and it sort of died, and she's sort of reclaimed like seaweed cooking in Chilean cuisine, and it's what she's famous for. Wow. And so she calls and says, like, can I have the holdfast of the kelp, which is the part that holds onto the line that we would, I'm like, are you sure that's what you want? She's like, absolutely. And then she makes some gorgeous piece out of it. And so it's been amazing to see how people are adapting and changing. We had a chef the other day that made kelp fritters. You know, there's a kelp po' boy that's in New Orleans that this place wanted to offer a vegan option to their oyster po' boy.
Yeah.
So really cool stuff.
So it's not like we're trying to get people to eat more seaweed. We're trying to get them to eat U.S. kelp and seaweed that's farmed here, and fresh seaweed.
Yep.
Because it's pretty ominous otherwise. I mean, we've been eating seaweed for a while in various ways, but that's the mission at this point, is to get them to eat our seaweed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that's what, you know, I'm asked this kind of constantly. I was talking to someone from Food 52 2 days ago, and they were like, so why hasn't kelp taken off? And I'm like, okay, if I'm asked that one more question, one more time, it gives in the New York Times, like, and then you read the article and it's me being like, of course it's freaking taken off. Like, it's everywhere. Go to the seaweed aisle. We're just doing it differently. It's fresh, it's domestic, it's different. Nobody's had the opportunity to buy this before. Nobody ever, right? Like, as soon as it's on the shelf, it disappears. People just never had this option. And so I kind of always push back on, like, and I'm so glad to hear you say, like, of course people are eating seaweed. Yeah. We just want them to eat fresh seaweed and domestic seaweed. And we want it out of that snack aisle. Like, let's get it everywhere. Let's get it on everything. Let's get Campbell's soup to have kelp in it because it's umami and it's green and it's cheaper. Like, let's get it everywhere. And that's sort of our mission now, is like, let's get our kelp on everything, because the more we do, every time someone eats kelp, they're getting another fisherman on the water. And we are at an urgent and critical point right now on the coast of Maine where we need to diversify. Lobster will be around in 30 or 40 years. It's not going to be like it is today. And we need to diversify now while people have capital, while they have careers on the water, and they can diversify just like all of the rest of us want to do now. And so if we can kind of get on everything now and we can absorb the shock of that volatility, then we're in a really different place.
I'm so glad you brought that up. And you know, when you said that, every time you eat seaweed, you support a fisherman. We always think of that with lobster, you know, where we never, I love that you're trying to take that and now make us think of that with seaweed. So maybe what you should do is help us understand, like, what is the life cycle of your seaweed at Atlantic Sea Farms? Explain to us how that starts and then how it ends, because we've got these beautiful pictures and I think it's nice for us to kind of see where all the action takes place, you know? So
this is Greg Morris in Spruce Head, in case any of you know him. I'm sorry, in Port Clyde. He's a second-year fisherman with us. And this was actually a picture from when the Marine Legislative Committee was thinking that maybe aquaculture was just not a good thing and that we should probably
Why would it not be a good thing? Why would they think that?
People don't want to see mussel rafts in front of their house. That would really bring down our property value. And I think, you know, what's happening is people are really kind of against, there are people out there in Maine that, you know, you guys are on the Damariscotta River, like people are saying like oysters, oh, there's too many oyster cages. Like that is the future of Maine. That is how we're going to continue to have coastal communities that are year-round communities, and not just owned by the rich that come in for a month at a time. This is a year-round job. And so there was some, you know, pieces in the legislature saying like, oh, we need to limit big aquaculture, whatever the hell that means. And so we brought them out on a boat, and we brought them out on Greg's boat and said like, and Greg and Scott, his partner in crime, basically were like, let me tell you what aquaculture is to us and let us show you that. And it was really impactful. And I think that there was this idea that aquaculture is some, you know, terrible thing that we need to fight. And meanwhile, these people are trying to just diversify in the face of climate change. And we need to be advocating for the growth of that industry. And so that's what this picture is from. But the life cycle here, this is probably around March of last year. So this is about, in that area in Port Clyde, it's about 2 months prior to harvest. So we can grow between 4 to 7 pounds, depending on how long people have been fishing with us and how good our seed is, per foot. So it gets really long, really beautiful, and really heavy.
So how deep is it in the water?
It's 7 feet under the water, so you can't see it. You can go over it with a boat, and all you see is moorings on each side. So we do about 4-acre leases, is pretty much the size. And on 4 acres, you could have 13,000 feet of line, which means about 60,000 pounds of kelp in a 4-acre lease. So when you think about soybeans, that's about 6 times more efficient than soybeans, which is one of the most efficient terrestrial pieces of agriculture. So this is about in March, so you see how heavy it is, and it's early in the season for them.
How fast does this stuff grow? Because you know, of course, I don't want to interrupt your life cycle, but how long does it take to grow to this point? This is almost ready for harvest, right?
Yeah, this is about 2 months before harvest, so it'll grow quite a bit more from there. It can grow when it's warm and sunny. It can grow about 2 inches a day.
Like photosynthesis. Yeah.
It's wild.
But what's happening in the dead of winter? Like how fast is it growing?
It's growing slowly.
So tell us that story about that farmer.
Yeah, so what happens is right now we're in the middle of nursery season at our facility, so it's incredibly stressful. And
why is it stressful?
Because you have to make sure the kelp, that's your whole crop for the next year. We're making all the babies for next year.
You're making all the baby kelps?
That's correct. So what we do is we go out to, we have a seaweed scientist on staff, and several other nursery staff. We go out and we basically, around the beginning of September is when kelp starts feeling pretty sexy and starts reproducing. The middle of the kelp is reproductive tissue. It's dark, and if you kind of go out to the beach at this time of year, what you'll see is, you see this kelp here, and that's not reproductive in the middle will be very dark. That's its seed strain. And if you let it out in the ocean, it kind of just like slowly releases everything. What we do is we get about 10 pounds of wild, so like nothing, for 400,000 pounds of line-grown seaweed.
Wow.
And we go out and we kind of hunt the best moms and dads, and it's usually in a place that's like horrible to get through and treacherous to swim to.
Who's doing that? The farmers are?
No, that's us. That's us
in-house.
Okay.
Yep.
And then we bring it back and we basically make that kelp feel like it washed up on shore, right? Because if it washes up on shore, it waits for the tide to come in and then it releases everything. We release it in our nursery into big kind of tanks of seawater, and we have PVC pipes that are about this big. This year we're doing bigger ones that are 1,000 feet, and they're wrapped in twine. And that kelp then swims around, those kelp spores swims around and looks for something to attach to. And it can't attach to anything else except that line. It jumps on the line and it holds on for dear life. And we incubate it for about 30 days. So we do, water changes constantly, salt water changes, just ocean water changes. We have lights on for 12 days for day, 12 hours for night. And then after about 30 days, we give it to the farmers. What they do is they take these 1,000-foot horizontal lines hooked to moorings on each side, tie it to the end of that twine in the middle of the PVC pipe, run that PVC pipe across, and that seed is set.
So, and then what do they check on it obsessively? Because that's what I would do. You don't touch it?
Yeah, there's people who touch it too much and we have to tell them to stop. And then there's people who just like don't touch it at all and we have to tell them to catch it. So we navigate that, and we know who they are.
The personality types.
Yes. And now we have more staff, so we actually get out there 2 times a month for an audit. And it's not an audit for quality as much as making sure that they're supported, because if there's a storm and moorings move along, they have to keep the line straight or stuff will get tangled up. I mean, there's 13,000 feet of line in 4 acres. Like, things can drift and things can tie up. Also, if it's sugar kelp, which is pretty buoyant, you want to keep it weighed down so it doesn't float to the top and sort of like, get bleached. And skinny kelp, which is our other kind of kelp, is heavy, so you want to keep that up. So we just sort of like go in but that's basically it, is like, is it hitting the bottom or is it falling on the top, and let's fix it and make sure the lines are straight. We have a lot of learning to do because we are so new at this. We know, we started in these 2 farms in Casco Bay, and now we have 27 from Portland to Eastport, and the water is different in each one.
Right.
And so, one farm last year just had fouling issues. Like, for some reason, the ends just never looked good, and we don't know why. So now we're able to put some monitors out there to better understand that. But we still have a lot to learn about each spot. Having said that, it's seaweed. It grows.
Right.
Like, there's nowhere it doesn't grow. There's just places it grows better than others.
So when it's time for harvest season, do you guys take it back? So tell us exactly what happens, because you don't want it to dry out, right? You want it to stay fresh. That's the whole thing. It's fresh seaweed. So what happens as soon as you get it out of there? You put it into the freezer. But then, what's the timeline on that?
Yeah, we bring it in between, harvest season starts about the 2nd week of March in the Casco Bay, and it ends about the 2nd week of June in Stockton Springs and Eastport. So it's a pretty long harvest season. People are required to bring in 10,000 pounds a day, so those 40-foot lobster boats. We don't say we only work with fishermen, but no one else can do it except fishermen. So.
I was gonna say, do you get hit up by a lot of entrepreneurs who are like, this is the way of the world. We're gonna save the planet. We're gonna go out in 15-degree weather, and we're gonna be entrepreneurs and fishermen.
It's my dream to farm kelp. I hear that so often, and I'm
what
like,
happens?
cool, get
do
a
you
40-foot boat.
Okay,
yeah, go get a 40-foot boat and sit on it for 48 hours in the middle of the ocean in February, and then give me a call and tell me you want to do this.
There you go. There's your answer.
Yeah.
Right.
It's not for the faint of heart.
Right.
It's very hard, and it's very cold. Seeding in December, you get you sit on those lines, and I make it sound so easy. Like, you just run the PVC pipe down, but like you can't do it with gloves because you have to be really careful with the seed.
Yeah.
And you're right on the water on a skiff trying to run it down 1,000-foot line without anything getting tangled. Like, it's hard work.
And your you can't feel your fingers.
You can't. Even fishermen complain about it. That's when you know it's bad. They're like, my hands are so cold.
So what are you taking them in the middle of January? Are you taking them chocolate chip cookies, like pies? Are you taking them these pies? What, you've got to be doing something. I know you meet them where they're at. So are you on the boat with a pie? What is it?
Oh,
How do you get it?
that would be real.
I'm giving you some ideas.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
No, they're just like, so I'm going to make money this year, right?
Yeah.
Because this is miserable.
Yeah,
Totally.
you got to give them some pies.
I mean, I stand on a boat for like 30 minutes in February, and I'm so close to their deck, like heater, that I burnt my Grundens. Like, I'm so cold. It is.
And you're from upstate New York, so that's saying a lot.
Pennsylvania, but yes, it's very, very cold. And so like it's miserable out there, but they know the paycheck's coming, and it's a lot easier than lobstering, right? 40 days on the water for pretty good money.
Yeah.
So yeah, what happens in March through April is we go to the dock. We are also, in addition to being like a nursery and a seed company, we're also a transportation company. Like we go to all the wharfs. We pick up at the dock. We weigh it at the dock. We transport our refrigerated trucks down to Biddeford. Now Biddeford, we just moved from Saco to Biddeford. We expanded to a 27,000 square foot facility in Biddeford.
Oh, really? When did that happen? During COVID?
It's still happening. We are now in our offices in our nursery. The ceilings went up today in our office. I could hear every single nail. But we will, we then bring it back, and we either freeze it. We either process it and freeze it, or process it and ferment it. And we actually end up fermenting it every 3 weeks for the rest of the year, or every 2 weeks now. So it's fermented. We kind of take it out of processing and ferment it from the freezer every 2 months, every 2 weeks. And so everyone has fresh fermented product all the time.
That's awesome. Yeah. So, I'm very, very curious about, there's Boss Lady right there. That's a Boss Lady picture. So you were at the Chef Summit. That was the first time I'd ever met you. And I remember walking in late. I was rushing to find parking in Portland, and you were one of the speakers. And actually, Ima was one of the speakers there as well. I remember that. And Blue A. If anyone's tried the Blue A, blueberry wine, it's absolutely amazing. The Charmat and the sparkling, it's so good.
But also, Ilma and I don't go many places without each other.
Yeah. So I just remember walking in, and I was completely captivated with you, and I thought, oh my God, what I wouldn't give to get an hour with this woman. And well, dreams do come true, so here we are. But
I hope it's.
And I said to you, I said, would you give me a minute to take a photo of you? And I took that photo, and I looked at it, and I said, one day we're going to be on stage together and talk about it. So there you go. That's a full circle. I just wanted to share that photo. So tell us what's going on in that photo. I specifically wanted to put that in there. Talk about Thesaurus.
Yeah, so that was last year, I believe. We were collecting Thesaurus tissue from an undisclosed location.
What is Thesaurus? Can you tell us?
So Thesaurus is the seed in the middle of the kelp that we're talking about being the reproductive tissue. Yeah. So that's kind of when we go out and find the seed and the moms and the dads for the following year.
So you actually get in there? I thought you didn't want to do anything with water.
I don't like to drive the boat. But no, I do go out for Thesaurus hunting every year. It's something that is really... it's for better or for worse. There's not that many people who know how to do it, and now 3 years in.
I was going to ask you, where did you learn this stuff?
I learned this stuff from our seaweed nursery folks, but there was always just one, and now there's more. But we're always a team, and I think it's pretty amazing to see year over year the effects of climate change too. And that, like this year, we went out and looked for source tissue, and the beds that have always been very healthy, and it's not from over harvesting or anything, nobody's harvesting it, are devastated.
Wow. And in Maine too. So,
that's correct. It's a very warm year. It's been warm since February.
It was 96 degrees on Memorial Day weekend, and we typically are dealing with a nor'easter from April. So tell me a little bit about the whole Bigelow experiment. I think that's really fascinating. We should share that because, Bigelow's our neighbor, and they're doing incredible things. And how did you guys collaborate with them on an experiment? I thought that was fascinating.
We have several going, which we actually have 3. So the first one is we did a project with Bigelow Labs where we basically planted mussels within so we call it kind of that kelp halo. Let's say that 4-acre farm is the kelp halo.
I love that.
The middle of, it's the halo effect, as Bigelow sort of coined. You plant the mussels in the middle of that farm, on the outskirts of that farm, and then about, outside and then way outside that farm. And studied it after one growing season, so very short, 5 to 6 months. And it was in the Casco Bay. And what we found is the mussel shell strength was 2 times as strong underneath the kelp halo than it was far outside the kelp halo. And it's because the kelp is actually removing carbon and nitrogen in the water. And how ocean acidification is happening is that we have too much carbon in the water. When it hits the surface, that ocean water absorbs that carbon, and it changes the pH of the ocean. Now that kelp then takes that carbon and nitrogen out of the water and holds it. If it were to just stay in there, it would die and it would float back in, right? But we're actually removing that. And in the meantime, the shellfish that are underneath that kelp halo are twice as strong, which means that actually it's sort of like when you think about children, if they're given a healthy diet under the age of 10, they have a head start, even if they had a terrible diet from then on. The head start that they get in that first 10 years is a significant indicator as to their health the rest of their life.
Right.
Similarly with those shell-bearing organisms, that ocean acidification, it's not like it further degrades it. It's now strong and can move forward. The mussel strength was also much stronger, but it's likely because of kind of the detritus that was following down that it was feeding from, as well as the carbon mitigation, but we know that the shell strength was that. We're also in 2 other studies with Bigelow right now. One with this organization called Oceans 2050, based out of France, run by Alexandre Cousteau, that is looking to see how much carbon is actually falling down from the detritus of the farms and being permanently locked in the seafloor underneath our farms. And they're taking core samples from 25 farms across the world, including a 400-year-old farm in China, to measure just how much carbon is kind of being permanently locked in the seafloor from our kelp farms. And then the third study, which might be the most exciting to me, is an animal feed study that we're working with them on, and that we know from studies that feeding kelp to cows reduces methane emissions significantly in those cows.
Wow.
And there's still a lot to learn. How much can they eat? How much do you need to feed them in order to get that reduction? How much is the reduction? We are guessing it's more than 60% reduction. What is the form in which they can eat it? Is it powdered? Is it dried? Is it full leaf? We have a lot of questions.
Right.
So we know the first step is this is a climate, the climate change solution is not eating cow. Let's just be honest.
Right.
But that's not going to happen. So how can we make cattle more, less
solution and
degrading?
less part of the problem.
And so we have a lot of questions to answer. It's a 5-year USDA grant that we'll be working with them on, trying to answer a lot of those questions and seeing, is this a viable feed income? What does it do to the dairy? What does it do to the meat?
Right.
We know in chickens, if you feed kelp to chickens, it actually reduces their need for antibiotics, which is cheaper. Feeding chickens kelp is cheaper than giving them antibiotics, which we don't want in their food anyway.
Right.
And so I just brought on to our board the co-founder of Vital Farms, and one of the ideas is getting more into animal feeds to kind of have that very helpful impact on the world as well.
How about our pets? I mean, I know Rachel Ray's a big pet person. Why don't you hit her up and send her some of the kelp and say, let's come up with something that's really, the pet business, the food business is insanely big. It's a huge market.
In 3 weeks, we're launching, someone is using our kelp to launch pet treats. I will say I was really worried because my dog didn't like them. And he eats the trash. And so I was horrified. But everybody else's dog seems to love them. So I think it's just my dog must hate me. But that's basically this is very much the case. People want to feed their pets healthier food. They people are looking for ways. They recognize that domesticated animals are some of the biggest contributors to food waste and the terrible environmental degradation that's coming from the feed that we're feeding our pets every day, and the animal welfare abuses and all of that on the farm side, so that we can feed our animals, including myself, fantastic nutrient dense food for my 14-year-old dog. And this is a much healthier way to do it, both for the animal and for the environment. So we're really excited about that market. But we have our consumer packaged good products, we have our retail brand. That is not who we are. We are a kelp company. That is one way that we tell our stories.
Right.
It's one way we can drive trial. We are a kelp company. So we are always saying like, hey, if Campbell's wants to put out, we don't want to put out kelp products on the market. We want other people to. We want to infect the American food system with a healthier way to eat.
And inspire. Yeah. So I love your mission statement, if that is, good food should do good. How are you guys doing good in 2022?
In 2022, we're going to be buying from 27 farmers, 1.5 million pounds. And I don't, for some reason, have the statistics right off the top of my head, but removing a whole lot of carbon from the ocean.
That's King Idar's fault. It was the 2 drinks.
It was the 2 drinks.
Yes, that's okay.
And also just having 27 people that are more prepared for the next harvest season. And I think giving talks like this and letting people understand that like the food system does not have to be broken. And we do not have to be continuing to perpetuate a system that is both bad for the farmers, consolidates money in the few, and makes people more unhealthy. That is our food system right now. That is the basis of our food system. For the first time in history, poverty can be measured in the United States by diabetes and obesity. That is not the normal path of history. Our entire society is sick from sugar, from salt, from fatty foods, from saturated fats, from foods that are making the environment worse and everybody's health worse. And it just doesn't have to be the answer. And that's what I mean. That's what we mean by good food should do good. Like if it tastes good, it should also do good. And we can try to prove that out. And
the best way we can start is at home, right? So like I have a 4-year-old who only eats chicken nuggets. That's it. And I make simmer sauces and it's devastating, right? And you have a dog that won't eat your treats. So, it's like, come on. So how can we start doing that with our kids? And I was thinking, Briana, this is great, the talk, and there's only one of you, but how can we all become our own kelp ambassadors so that we can maybe take it home or do a little talk at school and just, talk about climate change, but maybe do it through the lens of an actual product that they can touch and eat and smell and learn how to be creative with in the kitchens and home ec or, whatever way. Is there like a movement we can start and help you, because there's only one of you. You can't be at every talk.
No, we can't.
This will be on YouTube, but we need to figure out how to do that. How can we help you do that? Because I'm sure somebody here will be inspired by that.
Yeah, I think it's really simple things. First of all, buy it.
Yeah,
Second of all, go say hello to your oyster and mussel and scallop and seaweed farmer out front and thank them and tell them they're doing a good job, because we get beat down every day by people who don't want to see farms in the water. That is a big way. Support your local business, and then if you use social media, post recipes. If you have a dinner party, bring kelp to the table. Even if your answer is, I have no idea what to do with this, can we all think about how to do it? We have a recipe page, but put it out with a fork, ask people to try it.
Yeah, for sure. And you guys were on CBS and you kind of told the whole story. So tell us about that.
We've been very lucky with earned media, and I think it's because people are really kind of flabbergasted by the idea of fishermen saving the planet.
Yeah. So the story's out there. There's people who want to be ambassadors for you guys.
CNN. We were named Eating Well's Food Heroes of 2020. We are, kind of all over the news, and the reason is because people want hope right now. People are so tired of bad news, and it's good news and it's real. Like, it is very real. This is Steve Train in Casco Bay, probably saying something that I didn't want him to say in front of the camera. But that's this is a real story that real people are doing, and they're changing the world. And I think people are inspired by that. It's not a manifested story. It's not fabricated. There's no skeletons. It is what it is. And I think that's for people what they want to see. And so our media coverage has been great. And I think if you have social media, if you have friends and family and you want to send them those videos and tell them what's going out here just in Maine, like on this incredible, innovative coast, like that's the way you spread the word.
So, when I look at you, I see like this pillar of strength. You are incredibly articulate, passionate, driven, a mom of 2 beautiful boys. I even see you whipping pies for them on Instagram after you worked a very long day. So, I know that there's somewhere that you're being challenged and you need help. And as a CEO, you don't have all the answers. What is it that's giving you the hardest time right now to navigate? Is it money? Are you guys profitable? Like, what's the goal?
Yeah, I mean, I will just say, like, it's not just me. I think I have a new board in place, and they came by the other day, and these are people, we had a board meeting. These are people who have invested in, food companies around the globe, people who have seen sales to Mars, and, just people who know this world. They spent 2 days with my team, and they were like, we have never seen a better team. And that to me is kind of the biggest compliment I can get. These are people who are dedicated. None of us make much money. They're not doing it for the money. And they're just so dedicated. We have someone on staff who's grew up in a fishing family in Rockland, left for natural foods marketing, came back, and her dad's one of our fishermen. Like, we are family, actually. And people are really committed to what we're doing. So it's not just me, it's 11 of us, and we are all suffering through it. But as far as challenges go, it's mostly resources, right? It's having the people that we need to do what we need to do, and we have great people, but people can only do like 4 people's jobs,
Right.
And I was kind of we're getting some help on the operations side. We're hiring, and I have this person who's doing food production, quality control, food safety, food innovation, and a number of anything else that we can throw in his grab bag. And I said, it's as if I sort of like dropped him from a helicopter in the middle of the ocean and said, like, stay there. I'll be back in 24 hours, right? Like, we're just kind of all navigating this new space. So, it's resources for research and development. It's people ask me all the time, like, well, oh, that's really cool. You're coming up with like blueberry kelp cubes, for example. Like, what are the health benefits? I'm like, I know the kelp benefits of blueberry. I know the health benefits of kelp, how they kind of combine. I don't know. I don't have the money and I don't have the time. Like, I want to know there are answers. What is the marine ecosystem that we're providing on our farms? We know anecdotally that we are providing an environment for like spawning fish. We are providing seal habitat. We are providing all this incredible habitat, and we have zero bandwidth to actually study that and understand what those impacts are. We want to be able to get farmers like better monitoring equipment. We want to do better harvest. People are literally harvesting with a knife into a big bag. Like, we have so much that we could be doing, and so much more presentations I could be giving like this. And it's kind of easier during COVID because I could hop into Zoom and be in Singapore, and then hop into another one and be at the World Bank, and hop into another one but like, I can't. We don't have enough people. So, those are kind of the big challenges. We're innovating an industry and nobody's ever done what we're doing before. And so with those challenges also comes an incredible amount of opportunity, because people are listening and people want to know what we're doing. And we're not just some other like coffee company or some granola company. Like, we are doing something different, and people are watching, and people are ready to help. And in the state of Maine, the amount of help that we've gotten, like, you showed a recipe from Luke's Lobster. We didn't ask them to do that.
Yeah.
Bristol Seafood down in Portland last year, I called them and was like, Peter, we don't have enough freezer space. And he's like, yep, let me clear out a spot. Like, didn't charge us, opened up the spot. We used it for 3 months. We terrorized their people. They're like, what is this stuff? Why are we doing, like, are we a kelp company now? He's like, yeah, just do it. Like, and like, they just helped. Ready Seafood. They transport our stuff from Gloucester to Maine for nothing, basically. Everyone just wants to help. Like, they see what we're doing and they want to help. And there is no way this business would have survived anywhere other than Maine. And everybody has rallied together. And it's been so, like, anyone who comes here is like, is this how, we had a person come in from Seattle a few weeks ago who's running a really cool canned seafood company, and he's like, oh, you know, could we go out to dinner? I said, yeah, and I just called, like, Luke Holden from Luke's Lobster and Peter Handy from Bristol, and we just went out and we bought him dinner, and we all talked about, like, seafood, and it was collaborative, and we're all exactly 37, and we all have a really close relationship. And he walked away and was like, but what's the deal though? Like, do you guys work together? Like, are you guys making money from each other? Like, no. And Maine's a really special place. And, you know, every time I feel challenged, I can always pick up the phone and call someone here, and they will give you the shirt off your back to help. And that's been really exciting.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that as well, because we had Susan Axelrod here a couple of weeks ago, and she said the same exact thing. She echoed, having been a food writer, you know, for so long in Maine, that she sees that constantly with the restaurants all helping each other. And I think it, you know, it just creates this ethos that I think Maine has that many other states don't have.
They don't have it.
And they also don't have our kelp. I've heard you're a bit of a snob about that. Tell us about our kelp. Why is it so superior, Briana?
Well, I mean, it's fresh, right? I think if you think about a kale chip, you get a kale chip and then you pour a bunch of hot water over it and let it sit for 2 minutes and then think it's going to taste like kale.
And it tastes like soggy chip.
That's exactly what we're doing with dried seaweed. You know, there's a place for dried seaweed, like salt, right? Like you can kind of grind it up and sprinkle it over things. There's certainly a place for that. But it's not the normal thing. And I think I also just, from a health perspective, like I feed my kids, here's a picture of my kids up,
Tell us about them.
Constantly.
Yeah.
And
that's my goal today, to walk out of here and slide something into justice.
oh, you can
How
stick
can I
it
do
in
that?
wherever. Like those cute
No,
smoothie
nothing
cubes.
gets by this boy, so you've got to really give me the deal. Like, what is it?
I mean, I'm not a good person to ask, because my kids like will pick it up off the beach and be like, "Can I eat this?" I'm like, "No."
Oh, come on.
Like,
Okay.
they are not a good example. But I have been sneaking in, and you know, they think it's like cookies. Like there's these radishes in the middle of our sichi, which is our seaweed-based kimchi, that my oldest child calls the littles, and he sits there and I have this picture of him like, he's just sticking his fork in. But they, you know, I think, I forget where I was going with this, but they can kind of, you can kind of put stealth health in anything with kelp. It's not a super strong flavor. It's adaptable like tofu. But yeah, again, I don't remember where I was going with that, but it's pretty easy to stick into everything with kids.
That's awesome. So, you know, I'm going to take a few minutes here because I think we have a lot of folks here who probably have questions. So unless you have something else to share with us, which I do want to say one thing. I am like a specialty food association, like I'm obsessed, okay? I'm always looking at the new products and what's coming out. And I think having a Sophie, which is like the Oscars for food, is just amazing. It's like the deal for me. But you won something from there, which was far beyond winning a Sophie. You did win one for this, by the way. They did win. You won gold for this, right?
Best new product.
Best new product, yeah. But and that's the fermented seaweed. So, wow. And you've only been there since 2018. I mean, your team, amazing. Kudos to your team. But tell us what you won from the Specialty Food Association.
The Business Leadership Award for food.
That's pretty amazing.
Neat. It was pretty neat. Yeah, it was a nice industry honor to them looking across kind of all food and deciding that Atlantic Sea Farms should have the Business Leadership Award. And again, that's here in Maine.
Yes, and you put us on the map with
company.
that.
That's right.
Awesome. So let's give her a round of applause and let's get the questions going. Awesome. So this is how we do questions, because we want to make sure, because it's on film. So whoever asks the question, we're going to ask you to just repeat the question and then answer it, just so that everybody can hear it and it's on camera.
Okay.
Awesome. So does anybody have any questions for our kelp hero here? Yes.
You have 27 farmers in Maine, and you mentioned that they make a pretty good income on this. Can you say average what it is per year?
Yeah, it depends. So the question was, what's kind of the average income per year? So well, let's estimate, because there's some farms that are smaller than others. Some people have 2 farms, some people have 1 small farm, some people have 3 farms, 4 acres each. Let's estimate they're on the water an average of around 28 days. And their gross is anywhere between $40,000 and $90,000. And after their first year, most of the time, they put in about $5,000 to $15,000 into their farm the first year, and then after that, it's just upkeep on the ropes. So once you pay your sternman, it's let's say an average of $30,000 to $65,000 a year. After you pay your sternman and you take your startup cost out. So, and it's free seed, so we mitigate their risk completely. If they lose their farm, they don't lose anything other than the time.
Wow, that's a great question. Anybody else with questions for Bree?
We just hit our first person hit 6 figures this year, so.
Oh, wow.
I always kind of stress to them that if
That's
I made
amazing.
as much money as they do per hour per kelp, I would be a very rich woman.
Could you talk about the transportation challenges of the picking up and the dropping off?
The question was one of my most favorite questions I've ever gotten, and I've never gotten anything like that, thank you. Which is, what are the transportation challenges? So here on the coast of Maine, we have one incredible benefit, which is we do still have working waterfront. And that is not the case in most places in the United States. Having said that, we are seeing diminishing working waterfront. And the working waterfront that is present here in Maine right now is mostly situated around lobster. So with that, again, the fact that we have, like, counting my blessings every day, that we still have so much working waterfront, but it is not necessarily set up for kelp. So if you have 3 guys and gals landing in Spruce Head, for example, I don't know how many of you have ever been to the Spruce Head Co-op, but I'm all too familiar at this point. You can't get an 18-wheeler down there. And you have 30,000 pounds coming in, let's say that's 30 pallets. So that means you take a 16-foot truck, you pick up the first set, you go back to this middle point in the middle of Rockland. You go back down, you pick it up again, you go pick it back, put it back in Rockland, you go down and pick it up again, and then you stick it on that 18-wheeler. Then you have someone else doing the same thing in Port Clyde and the same thing doing it in Stockton Springs. And then you actually have to find the 18-wheeler and then someone to drive the 18-wheeler. And then it has to go down to Gloucester or to Biddeford where we are. So the logistics piece is one of our most expensive pieces. It actually costs us more than the kelp. But anywhere else, and it would actually be worse. And so, we're working on it. The bigger we get, actually, the easier it is, because we can kind of have, let's say if we have 50,000 pounds coming in one day in Spruce Head, it actually gives us the ability to just load from Spruce Head, to a central place rather than 3 at once. So what I spend 70% of my time thinking about is things like this, actually, and moving the kelp around. But it is better than it would be elsewhere. Portland has, the Portland Fish Exchange, which again it can be very problematic. This is a piece of infrastructure that should be a huge net benefit to the fishing community, but it's set around ground fish, and you can't really land anything there for anything else. And you spend $16 a pallet to land something on the fish exchange, but it's the only place to land it. And they're not making any money from ground fish anymore, so they're gouging up the prices of the people who work with it. And the Portland city government is subsidizing it, but it doesn't seem to be subsidized at the level that works. So, I think one thing that we can do in the state of Maine is advocate for, money to actually go into these places, these integral pieces of working waterfront. And Portland has it. We just need to fund it. And we were basically their only money for 2 months when we landed kelp, because nothing else was coming in, and they don't land lobster. So the working waterfront challenge is very real, and there's organizations like CEI and the Island Institute that are doing a lot around working waterfront preservation, but those are very meaningful pieces. If we want to have a year-round community in the future, we need to be investing in our infrastructure.
You mentioned that you would love to know more about what's actually going on, in the kelp farm biologically. And I'm wondering if, in addition to Bigelow, if there's any help from the university, Darling Center, is anybody actually digging into it and working with you, checking that out?
So the question was about is there's any help from universities looking at some of the scientific studies around our farms. We have gotten so much support from University of New England on the food safety side of things. They have a professor there, Carrie Byron, who has basically made it her mission. And we are so fortunate to have her in the state of Maine and the students that she produces. I'm not even sure she has money to do what she's doing, but she makes it happen, and we can basically call her for anything about kelp and the food safety aspects of it, and we're really close partners. Most of the time, we tend not to work with the universities, and the reason for that is because what are we going to apply to a grant for $150,000 where we get $10,000 of it and the university overhead takes 50 of it? And it's become increasingly problematic, and then it takes 5 years. So we tend to try to get grants and work with people that are much more agile, and Bigelow is one of them. And there's specific professors at UNE and elsewhere who are also incredibly forward thinking, and we're excited to work with them. New England Ocean Cluster down in Portland is trying to kind of provide some of those services, not them themselves, but kind of figure out ways to bring us to bear. But sometimes the university system can kind of lose sight of what industry needs because they're looking at their grant cycle, and that can be problematic. There are some really good people in those places, but we tend to work a lot more with private entities like Bigelow. They move a little bit faster and a little more agilely.
Are there maritime transport possibilities for kelp rather than semis?
It's a great question. That I think gets more to a scale issue, and back to like if we have scale in these places, then that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we have this tradition in Maine of the smack boat for the lobster industry where people move that around. We haven't worked with smacks in the past. We also would need to clean a lot of them. Right now, that's not a possibility, but as we scale, that is definitely an opportunity, an option we'd be looking at. It would be great.
Scooters.
Yeah, exactly. Scooters. That would be a really fun trip, too.
You mentioned the domestic market, but didn't say anything about an export market. Is there a large export potential?
I don't know the answer. The question was, is there an export potential for our kelp? I don't know the answer. And I think because we have had such a small staff, we've been unable, we've been drinking out of a fire hose for the last 2 years. So there are a lot of questions we have around that we'd like to explore. The Maine International Trade Center is an incredible asset to the state of Maine, and they're always willing to help. And they've said, like, can we help? And we're like, we don't even have the time to actually like sit down with you to talk about how you could help. But that is another resource in Maine that makes us feel very supported and ready to go when we get to that point. My assumption, which you should never assume, is that there would be a good market for this, particularly in Japan. We've gotten a lot of interest from the Japanese market. People are increasingly concerned in East Asia as the awareness of where their food is grown is coming from, that American food, for better or for worse, depending on what you're talking about, is really valued there for a higher quality. And so I think people are increasingly concerned that most of the seaweed that they do eat is from China and Indonesia in pretty nasty waters for the most part, and it is becoming an increasing concern there. And so there has been a lot of interest that we've received from Japanese buyers. We just have not engaged in that yet. But I think it is a big export opportunity down the line. We're just not able to do that yet.
Can you buy this product in any local stores here?
Yep, the question was, can we buy it in local stores? And the answer is, it's pretty much in every co-op in Maine that I'm aware of. You can also buy it in Whole Foods in Portland. And we are rolling our ready cut and our cubes out to Hannaford as we speak, to all the Hannafords in Maine and all of them in Massachusetts. They do not have our fermented seaweed salad, but they do have our cubes and our ready cut.
And Rising Tide, right up the street.
And co-op, yep, all the co-ops in Maine have it. Rising Tide Co-op, I think, has had it, was like one of the first to have it.
I didn't find the cut kelp there, though. I only found the three of these, yeah.
The co-op's
So,
freezers are so
yeah.
small, it's hard to, we kind of push this for co-ops just
Yeah.
because they don't have the space for the freezer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I heard you mention Gloucester, is that Gloucester, Mass?
That's correct.
Have
Yeah.
you're utilizing their food processing infrastructure and cold chain?
We are using their cold chain infrastructure in Gloucester, and the reason for that is because, as some of you may know, if anyone has talked to someone in the seafood industry, you know that there's no cold storage facility up here. And they're building one right now in Portland, and I suspect every one of those slots will be filled immediately because we're all clamoring for that to happen. And this goes back to the infrastructure piece and working waterfront piece. You know, almost all of us use Gloucester. Every lobster company I know uses cold storage in Massachusetts.
Why is that? Why hasn't one been built? Let's talk about that.
I would love to know.
I think you're already on it, so I'm not even going to
No,
worry
I
about
mean,
that.
people have been looking to have that done for a long time, and there's some pretty transformational leaders that have made it happen in Portland, and we're all really grateful for
Yeah.
the work that's been done to make that happen. And similarly to aquaculture, there was people who decided that there shouldn't be a cold storage facility near the water because it hurts their views. Luckily, that was defeated, and kind of the NIMBYism was defeated. It is not in a pretty part of Portland, quite frankly, so I can't even imagine what they were trying to save, but it's really necessary. And the point that we kind of always make is like, if you don't like a mussel farm, how's blight? We really need to think about leaning into our working waterfront. We need to be thinking about year-round incomes. We need to be thinking about ways that people can make a living on the water, and cold storage is one of those reasons, one of those ways we're going to be able to do it. And it's not sexy, and it's not your like community oyster farmer, but guess what? None of us survive without that kind of stuff.
Right, the essentials. I
right.
would consider that to be a fundamental.
Well, if honestly, if not for the grace of Ready Seafood, who brings our stuff back from Gloucester for very cheap, we wouldn't be able to afford cold storage.
Wow. All right, well, I hope you get in line there and sign up.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
sure.
ready.
I'm sure.
As soon as I can.
Yeah, yeah.
Can kelp be used for salmon aquaculture?
The question.
Right, the question. The question was, could kelp be used for salmon aquaculture? And the answer is absolutely yes. And we're working with several feed companies right now to think about how they could be using it. There's obviously a move away in the finfish industry. I think that the finfish industry gets a bad rap from the 70s. It's gotten a whole lot better since then, but there are certain parts of the fish industry that still need some improvement, and one of them is the feed. Similar to terrestrial agriculture. You know, I talked to someone the other day, and this is probably going to terrorize every one of you because it did for me for like the next 3 days, who takes garbage and processes it to give to cows, and what they look for is sugary garbage. And they were calling us and said, do you have any waste? Which we don't, because we'll take your waste and mix it with our donuts for our cows. And I was like, just tell me more about this. We don't have what you're looking for, but I really want to learn about this. But
Is this someone in Maine? that
no,
gave you a call?
this is in Massachusetts. But it's nationally. That's what we feed our animals. That's what we feed our livestock. And similarly with fish, many of the fish feeds aren't the quality that we would all want to see that being done. And in Maine, they do a really good job, but that's not kind of universally true. And if there's no sort of universal fish feed that can both do well for the environment and the fish that are eating, and we're hoping to kind of move into that market in a pretty big way. You know, even if it's very low margin, it's extremely high volume.
Well, with the incoming agriculture endeavors here in Maine coming up.
Yeah.
Big circle.
That's right. And we know that algae is good for the ocean because it comes from there, and it's better when it's there. So I think there's a lot to investigate there, and we're excited to kind of pursue that market.
Okay, if we don't have any more questions, action steps. What do you want us to do when we get out of here today?
Buy kelp, cook with kelp, support your local aquaculturist. If somebody's having a hearing in your community for an aquaculture lease, show up and support it. Show up. I know that might sound insignificant, but people who go to hearings are usually people who don't want the thing to happen, and then that's what the Department of Marine Resources hears. All the people who want it to happen don't go. Go, show up, support them, ask them what they can do to help. Ask them if you know there are people in your community who are not supporting oyster lease or a mussel lease or a seaweed lease or a lease that you know should be there. Go to their house, have coffee with them, bring them the oysters, bring them the seaweed. You know, we see it all the time. It just takes somebody meeting people where they are and saying like, hey, you're an environmentalist, I'm an environmentalist, we both like oysters. Let's go to this hearing together and support this company that's trying to make a living on the water and trying to have a better future. You know, support the Maine Aquaculture Association, support your local fishermen, support your local seafood, because it really is, you know, it's not an industry of the past, it's an industry of the future. And we all kind of, the more we can do as Mainers to further that, the better future we're going to see for our children.
Briana, I am convinced that you literally have one of the best jobs on the planet. So on that note, I'm going to thank you so much on behalf of all of us tonight for just sharing your bright light, your vision, your passion, and your purpose with us.
Thank you
That's
for
the most
having
important
me.
is the purpose. You're amazing. I'm going to let
And
you
give it up for Cherie for hosting all these leaders and bringing them to the stage.
It's the theater, and I do want to say thank you to Damon and Gary who make us all look so good. And of course to Christina, who's the new incoming executive director, taking the reins from Andrew, which seems like an impossible thing, but we have so much faith, and she's already running a mile a minute doing everything. So thank you so much, the Lincoln Theater, for supporting this, and our sponsors. And I want to give you the floor because you have a lot of fans out there who want to talk to you. So I'm going to go eat my kelp, and I'll see you at the next one. Thank you, Brianna.